Leading up to the 2020 election, Joe Biden had been leading Donald Trump by 7.2 percentage points and ended up winning by only 4.5 percentage points nationally. In some of the swing state polls, he was leading by large amounts, even outside the margin of error, such as in Wisconsin, where he was leading by around 8 percentage points. Despite him leading those polls by huge amounts and by leading the national popular vote by over 7 percentage points, he only ended up winning by 4.5 percentage points, and all those swing states that he was supposed to win by large amounts, including the state of Florida, ended up being a lot more narrow in reality. So what if in the 2024 election the same thing happens and Democrats are overestimated by around 3 percentage points nationally and by large amounts in each of the swing states? In today's video, we're going to be filling out that exact map. Now, keep in mind, and this is a huge disclaimer, I do not believe this will be the presidential election map. This is not my personal prediction, and this is not a prediction of all of mine. This is only data that we have based on the polling errors in previous elections, and this is not at all what I believe is going to happen. But either way, let's get started on this. And we're going to be using 538 to really gauge on those past metrics as well as RCP. Let's also go to the national vote on 538, where we can see that also in 2020, they had Biden winning by 8.4 percentage points. So they overestimated Biden by around 4 percentage points. As we can see, he ended up winning the popular vote by 4.5 percentage points. Electoral college here, he won most of these swing states by very narrow amounts, by 1.6, 0.2, 0.3, and then 1.2. Those states decided the election. And those polls ended up having him winning a lot of those states by huge amounts. As we can see here in the state of Wisconsin, he was supposed to win by 8.4 percentage points. He won by 0.63%. So let's get started on today's video. We'll first analyze the national vote. Right now, Kamala Harris does lead by 1.8 percentage points. Applying that similar error that we have, Donald Trump right now would be leading in RCP by around 1 to 2 percentage points, and that would pretty much grant him the Electoral College win. Keep in mind, for Democrats to win the Electoral College, they would probably need to win the popular vote by over 3 percentage points. Joe Biden won it by 4.5, and he still barely was able to win the Electoral College by a combined 40,000 votes in these three states. So that is very good to keep into consideration how much Democrats need to end up winning the popular vote to really win the election. So going off of the fact that applying the same error would give Trump the popular vote win, it would be practically almost impossible for Kamala Harris to be able to win the election as a whole. But this isn't about the popular vote, it is about these states. So let's fill out this map, and we're going to be going over some safe states for it. These are states that are not really going to change no matter what. They're still going to be in that safe column. They might be closer, but they won't, and then they won't really change too much. They won't go down into that likely margin. And there also isn't really too much polling to really change them at all. And we're going to be filling out all of these safe states for either side. And we're going to be stopping at the states of Iowa and Ohio, because in those states, I want to take into consideration how badly those polling errors really were. In the state of Iowa, in the 2020 election, it was supposed to be a 1.3 percentage point win for Joe Biden, and Donald Trump ended up winning by 8. So taking into consideration the polls we have now where Trump leads by a safe margin, he's supposed to win the state by around 20 percentage points. Similar thing with the state of Ohio. We can scroll down to the state of Ohio, go back to 2020. It was 0.8 percentage point lead for Trump, and he ended up winning it again by 8 percentage points. Taking the polls now, where he leads some of them by a safe margin, some of them by a double digits, he's going to be winning the state also by up to 20 percentage points. And that's going to be, most of the safe states. I just wanted to go over Iowa and Ohio because they had such a bad polling miss in the 2020 election. But now that we have all the safe states out of the way, we are now familiarized with the most likely map. These are the map that is going to be the states that are going to be, ranging from the most competitive all the way to states that could be lower than 12 percentage points, but not quite in that safe margin. So to summarize it, all these states are going to be states that are you want to look out for the most. The states of Nevada, such as, and Georgia, will be very, very competitive, going to be decided maybe even in that tilt margin. Meanwhile, states of like Colorado and Texas are going to be on that higher margin, closer to being safe, but not quite there. Let's go west to east, starting with the state of Nevada. Nevada is one of those states that is not going to really decide the election as much because it is only worth 6 electoral votes, but is definitely going to be important to say the least. In the 2020 election cycle, Joe Biden was supposed to win the state by 5.3 percentage points, and he ended up winning it by 2.4 percentage points. So that is going to be an overestimation of around 2.5 percentage points. Going to some polling we do have now in Nevada, it is a complete tie between Harris and Trump. So that'll put the state in the lean column for Donald Trump. He'll win the state by around 2 percentage points on this map. The state of Arizona is going to be similar. If we go to the state of Arizona in the 2020 election cycle, it wasn't that inaccurate. You know, the Sun Belt is a little more accurate than the Rust Belt. But either way, he was supposed to win. Joe Biden was supposed to win by 2.6 percentage points. He ended up winning it by 0.3 percentage points. So an overestimation of around 2 percentage points. Going here to this map, we can see Trump leads by 0.5 versus Harris. And it is going to inflate his margin up to around 2.5 percentage points. So that's also going to be in that lean column. Going to the states of Colorado and New Mexico, 2 states that have been pretty solid for Joe Biden in the past election. Joe Biden was actually underestimated in the state of Colorado, one of the only states that underestimates him. He ended up winning it 1 point more than he was supposed to. He wanted in that safe column. He was supposed to win it by 12.5 percentage points. There isn't much polling, but 538 does give us a little bit of polling. All of this together would put the state in that higher end of the likely column. Pretty safe for the Democrats. It won't be too competitive from the polling that we do have. The state of New Mexico is one of those states where Democrats have been doing good. Republicans, though, have been targeting the state because they do believe their Hispanic trends are going to translate into better results. Biden was supposed to win it by 11.7. He ended up winning it by 10.8. So only an overestimation of 1 percentage point. The 538 does have a little bit of polling. It does have this mostly in that likely margin between Trump and Harris. Either way, it's going to be staying in that likely column, more on that lower end, kind of like around 6 to 7 percentage points, being close to being lean, but not quite. Moving on to Texas now. Texas is a big state. Democrats have been targeting the state of Texas. It has 40 electoral votes. They thought they might have a chance in 2020 because Trump only led by 1.1. He ended up winning it by 5.6, however. So they overestimated Democrats by around 4 percentage points. And if we check the polls now, Trump leads by around 5 to 9 percentage points. Averaging all that together, it would be around a 6 point to 7 point lead for him. And then putting all the errors into consideration, he would be winning the state of Texas at the higher end of that likely margin, closer to 10, maybe even up to 12, but not quite in that safe margin. But before we continue on this video, and before we get to the Rust Belt, please subscribe, like my content, and leave all your comments down in the section below. I appreciate all the support and all the feedback I get on my videos. But let's get back to this map. And let's go to the state of Minnesota. Minnesota is a state where Joe Biden performed well. He won by 7.1 percentage points, up from 1.5 percentage points where it was very close. Clinton's margin wasn't that impressive, but the polls in the state of Minnesota did overestimate Joe Biden by a little bit. They overestimated him by 2 percentage points. Taking the polls we do have now, Harris is on a good track to win the state by a likely margin. But if we want to take into consideration that polling miss, she'll end up winning the state by around 5 percentage points, which would put it in that lean column. Wisconsin is one of those states where Democrats are always expected to win by huge margins. As we covered in the beginning of the video, Joe Biden was supposed to win Wisconsin by 8.4 percentage points. He only ended up winning by 0.6. So that's around an 8 percentage point overestimation. And that's why this lead of around 1.4 percentage points for Harris right now is not good at all for them. Because if we take that error into consideration, that'll give Trump a win of around 4 to 5 percentage points, even maybe up to 6. I do not believe that's going to happen. And I wanted to just make sure everybody understands. I do not believe that Trump's going to win this state of Wisconsin by that large amount. However, if we take into consideration only the polling misses, that is what the results are going to be. And then in the state of Michigan, also famously known for overestimating Democrats, not as much as the state of Wisconsin, but still Biden was supposed to win it by 8 percentage points. He ended up winning it by almost 3. So they overestimated Biden again by around 5 percentage points. Going to the polls we do have now, Harris does lead by 1 percentage point. She had led by a larger amount, but now it has tightened because recent polls have been more favorable for Trump. But either way, she does lead by 1. Taking that miss into consideration, this would flip again to Trump's column. He would win it in that lean margin by around 2 to 3 percentage points in that column. The most important and crucial states, that the 19 electoral votes in the state of Pennsylvania, will most likely decide the winner of this election. In the 2020 cycle, this state was supposed to go to Biden by 4.7 percentage points. He ended up winning by 1.2. So out of these 3 states, this is the one that was polled the most accurately out of these Rust Belt states. So that's something good to take into consideration when looking at the state of Pennsylvania as compared to the state of Wisconsin or the state of Michigan. But either way, still Biden was overestimated by over 3 percentage points. Taking that into the polling we have now, which is almost a dead tie, this would flip the state once again, putting it in that lean column for Donald Trump, and that would almost put him over the top. But before we get to the South, let's go and take into consideration Nebraska second. Nebraska second is a very left-trending district in the state of Nebraska. Joe Biden was able to win Nebraska second by around 6 to 7 percentage points, and he was favored to win it by less than that. And this time around, there isn't too much polling to take into consideration, but right now I am going to put it on that lean margin for Democrats, almost in that likely margin. Maine at large, a state that Donald Trump lost by 9 percentage points. He had gained a lot on Clinton. Biden had gained quite a considerable amount from Clinton. The polls, though, in 2020 had also overestimated Joe Biden by a little bit amount, not too much. He was supposed to win the state by 13 percentage points. So they did end up overestimating him by around 4 percentage points. The polls now, there isn't too many, but the polls now do show a much tighter race. Still, however, this would fall in that tilt column for Kamala Harris, a lot more narrow than the 9-point win we see for Joe Biden in 2020. Same thing for the state of New Hampshire. He won by 7.4 percentage points. Taking into consideration those polls in the state of New Hampshire, Joe Biden was supposed to win by 11.1 percentage points. So a 4-point overestimation, the exact same as the state of Maine. Right now, she does lead by 7, but taking that poll miss into consideration, she will win the state by 3, putting it in that lean column for her. The map now is 250 to 213 for Trump. And let's go to the state of Virginia. Virginia is a state that Joe Biden did very well, and he won it by 10 percentage points, which is pretty historic for the Democrats. This state used to be very favorable for the Republicans, but has flipped into the Democratic column. The polling was not that bad. He was only overestimated by around 1 to 2. So that's very indicative of the polls now that only have Harris up by around 3 to 4 percentage points. There is even some polls that have Trump up by 4 points and then 1 point. These are very old, so we're not going to weigh them as much as these polls over here. In all, though, however, Harris does lead by only 2, and the polls would actually flip the state narrowly into Trump's column. I do not believe that this is going to happen, but the polls in Virginia show a really, really odd trend of this state being a lot more narrow than the states of Minnesota and New Hampshire, which is very interesting. If Trump wins the state of Virginia, he doesn't even need to win any of these 3 Rust Belt states. But either way, that's what we have according to those trends, if the polls are wrong. And moving over to the state of North Carolina. Now, something about North Carolina is that if Virginia ends up going Republican, North Carolina will go Republican as well. Joe Biden was supposed to win by 1.8. He ended up losing by 1.3. So he was overestimated by around 3. And then taking into consideration these polls, once again, Trump leads by half a percentage point. He will end up winning the state by around 4, which is close to my prediction. This is one of the states where it is close to my prediction. I do believe he'll win by around 3 to 4. Either way, now we're going to get to Georgia. And Georgia is probably the most accurate state in terms of polling. Joe Biden was only supposed to win by 1.2. He ended up winning by 0.2, so it's only a 1% overestimation. Right now, Georgia has the race at a dead heat where Trump only leads by 0.2. Taking into that miss, he'll win by around 1.2, which is also very similar to my prediction. The predictions down here, according to those polling misses, are a lot more accurate, while I believe the predictions up here, according to those polling misses, are overestimating Democrats. Of course, I do not think that polling miss will be as bad as 2020. However, this map, once again, is just based off of those polling misses and not my prediction at all. And Trump has already won 295 to 213, but the last state, the state of Florida, Florida was supposed to go to Joe Biden. He was supposed to win the state of Florida by 2.5, but we all know the state of Florida shifted heavily to the right. Donald Trump ended up winning by 3.4, so an overestimation of around 6. And right now in Florida, there isn't too much polling, but the polling we do have does have Trump up by 4.6. Taking that miss into consideration, he'll win that state by around 8 to 9 percentage points, which would put it in that likely column for him. And this is going to be our final map based on those polling misses. Now, keep in mind, this is not what I believe as my prediction. Republicans do have 325 to Democrats 213. So taking into consideration the polling misses in 2020 and applying them to the 2024 map, we can see here that Donald Trump is easily able to win the election. Now, I'm very, very surprised the state of Virginia would be this close and would flip into his column. But either way, we're still awaiting more polling and more data to come out of these states. Maybe something would change. I do think Kamala Harris's bump is starting to, disappear a little bit. Trump is gaining back in some of those swing states. So this is definitely something to keep in mind. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, like this video, and share it with all your friends.